The United States of America has had a very poor track record when it comes to race relations. The nation was founded on slavery, and from the time the first slave ship arrived in America, prejudice has stained this great nation. The civil rights movement in the 1950s and 60s began with the ruling of Brown v. Board of Education, which set in motion various events such as the Montgomery bus boycott, the integration of Central High School in Little Rock, Arkansas, as well as many other courageous acts that have led to much more racial equality in the United States today. However, many people today feel that a great injustice is being done to the African American community by unequal treatment by the police. This video looks at various instances of alleged police brutality and decides whether the victims were truly taken advantage of or if these cries against the police are founded on ill-conceived notions.
In February 1965, about 500 people in Marion, Alabama, attempted to peacefully walk from Zion United Methodist Church to the Perry County Jail. The walk, organized by the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, was in protest of the arrest of James Orange, a civil rights worker. The marchers planned to sing hymns outside the jailhouse in order to peacefully display their opposition to Orange's detainment. Unfortunately, the authorities incorrectly interpreted the gathering as a jailbreak attempt, and a line of Marion police and state troopers intercepted the protesters at the post office. All streetlights were abruptly turned off, and the police began to beat the protesters. The sudden violence caused the crowd of marchers to scatter and retreat back toward the church. One of the marchers was a young man named Jimmy Lee Jackson. He, along with his mother, Viola Jackson, and his grandfather, Cager Lee, ran into Mac's Cafe when the chaos ensued. They were pursued by state troopers and attacked in the restaurant. An officer clubbed 82-year-old Lee to the floor and then began to beat Viola as well. When Jackson tried to protect his mother, he was picked up and thrown against a cigarette machine by one trooper, and another trooper shot Jackson twice in the abdomen. Jackson died 8 days later in the hospital.
Jimmy Lee Jackson's tragic death was a significant part of the inspiration for the march from Selma to Montgomery in March of 1965. It is difficult to make an argument for the side of law enforcement in this particular situation. Nevertheless, the unpopular point of view must be heard and analyzed. There really is no question that the Marion police, sheriff's deputies, and Alabama state troopers were out of line on the night of February 18, 1965. However, it is important to remember the dangerous position the police are put in and the game-time decisions they are expected to make. The problem with this situation was that the police were not in any danger, and the beating seemed almost like a planned attack by the police. Regardless of whether they were reluctantly following orders or whether they took advantage of a defenseless civil protesters to assert dominance, there is really no legitimate justification for the death of Jimmy Lee Jackson.
On March 3, 1991, the Los Angeles Police Department attempted to pull over Rodney King for erratic driving, and he evaded through a high-speed chase. When he was finally subdued, the officers beat him with batons and tased him for well over 10 minutes in one of the most infamous incidents in American history. A random onlooker recorded the beating, and the actions of the police became a national discussion point. None of the officers involved were indicted despite the video evidence, sparking the 1992 Los Angeles riots. 2 days after the riots started, President George H.W. Bush addressed the nation. He called for restored order and called the need for justice a secondary issue. He praised the police without offering much correction and alienated many African Americans across the nation. Some people saw the actions as condonable and saw Rodney King as the aggressor.
In your opinion, Rodney King controlled these events?
Yes, because when he decided to stop the action, when he did indeed stop, put his hands behind his head, the officers quit striking him. And okay. I think had he not been constantly trying to get away, etc., I don't think this would have taken place.
Most others saw Rodney King as the victim of a horrible hate crime.
And Stephen, is there anything you would like to say or ask of this juror?
I think that she has to understand that Brian Allen and Freddie Helms were both beaten too by officers at the scene. That never came out in the trial. There were civilian witnesses that spoke to the fact that Rodney King complied from the time that the car stopped until the videotape started. And I think she bought hook, line, and sinker the defense argument. I feel sorry for her. And I know that sometimes she has to deal with the fact that there's a lot of violence in Los Angeles. And ma'am, if that's what you choose to believe, then so be it. But that is certainly not the impression I got from the evidence. And if you believe for a minute that Rodney King controlled that scenario, you'll believe anything.
At 11:54 a.m. on August 9, 2014, Michael Brown was caught on surveillance video showing that he stole cigarillos from a nearby convenience store. Darren Wilson, the police officer, was notified and given descriptions of Brown. Wilson spotted Brown walking down the street and parked his car in front of him to stop him. An altercation ensued between Brown and Wilson through the window of the police vehicle. Brown fled while Wilson charged out of the police vehicle in pursuit. Brown stopped and turned towards Wilson, who also stopped. Brown stepped towards Wilson, and Wilson pursued to shoot him 12 times. The last shot was most likely the fatal shot. There are many different reports from witnesses of what Brown was doing, with some saying he was completely innocent and others saying he put Wilson's life in great danger. On August 9th, riots began in Ferguson after the jury not bringing charges over the killing of Michael Brown. The conflicting versions of the story make it extremely hard to understand who was at fault.
At that time, he reached out the window with his left arm. He grabbed onto my friend Big Mike's throat, and he's trying to pull him in the vehicle.
What little police have said differs sharply. Police say the two struggle over the officer's gun.
There was at least one shot fired within the car.
Mike Brown's friend says Brown was just trying to get away, not fighting for the gun.
Others saw Michael Brown as the clear aggressor.
Michael Brown did not have his hands up, as the eyewitnesses, some of them, suggested.
Well, I don't know if that's the conclusion they've drawn at all, Megan. I think this leaked information has suggested they don't know, but you have the police officer's version.
Let's not mislead the audience.
Yes,
I want you to tell.
I don't want to mislead anybody.
No, I just want to make sure that, because what the autopsy says is not in dispute, and what Judy Melanik, the forensic pathologist, said is that one of the officer's shots hit Brown's forearm and traveled from the back of the arm to the inner arm, which means Brown's palms could not have been facing Wilson. That trajectory shows that Brown probably was not taking a standard surrender position, she said.
2014 saw yet another instance of alleged police brutality with the death of Eric Garner.
Homicide. That's what a medical examiner ruled in the death of Eric Garner. On July 17th, police in Staten Island placed Garner, an African-American father of 6, in a chokehold after they confronted him for selling single cigarettes known as Lucy's. Graphic video of the incident shows an officer pulling Garner to the ground by the neck and then holding his head against the pavement. He repeatedly says he cannot breathe.
A private medical examiner reported that Garner died from an illegal chokehold and compression of the chest, which has become the clear argument for why the police should be prosecuted.
Well, you know, the charge is always excessive use of force, if that is what it is. And because they have banned the use of the chokehold, that kind of makes the case, if he was indeed doing a chokehold, that based on your own policy, he was using excessive force because you've banned that. Now,
many people argued that the chokehold was not responsible for Garner's death and that the force was brought on from Garner resisting arrest.
You had a 350-pound person who was resisting arrest. The police were trying to bring him down as quickly as possible. If he had not had asthma and a heart condition and was so obese that almost definitely he would not have died from this, the police had no reason to know that he was in serious condition. I know people are saying that he said 11 times or 7 times, "I can't breathe." Well, the fact is, if you can't breathe, you can't talk. And if you've ever seen anyone locked up resisting arrest, and I've seen it, and it's been white guys, and they're always saying, "You're breaking my arm, you're choking me, you're doing this." So police hear that all the time.
For the first time, almost everyone believed that some punishment was due for the policeman who administered the chokehold. So when the officer escaped indictment, many have been left speculating as to how to fix a potentially flawed system.
The grand jury, which at one time historically was a bulwark of liberty against oppressive government, is now outdated. What happens is it becomes an instrument of manipulation by the prosecutor. Usually, it winds up with a probable cause indictment.
Because that is what the prosecutor wants.
But not when it's a cop.
Right.
The built-in conflict of interest, the cop needs the police hour to hour on all his 98% of his criminal prosecutions.
The prosecutor is saying.
If the prosecutor goes against the cops, he won't get the cooperation on his cases. So the prosecutor, behind closed doors, is able to manipulate the grand jury to not get an indictment.